Hello and welcome to the 11th episode of the Dirty Side of the Grid podcast. We've turned up late to qualifying and we've qualified on the dirty side of the grid. But since my name is Lance Stroll, we're starting on pole position. I'm Yusuf and this is my co-host Mohammed. And this is like the sixth try to record the beginning of this episode. So, yeah.
You know what?
We haven't done this in a while, that's
Yeah, no, me and my old friend, we'd call it a bit of rusties.
Yeah.
So not just rusty, but you're covered in rusties, dripping in it, some might say.
Yeah.
So,
anyways, on with the episode. So basically, this episode, the next episode, we're going to be recording intro to F1 series, where we're going to be talking about kind of like beginner stuff and then maybe a bit more advanced stuff. And we'll cover kind of all the big topics related to kind of F1 essentially.
So this is going to be like so we're doing another two-part series. The last one was the season review. This time we're going to do a complete like from the ground up basics understanding of F1, and then next week is going to be more technical, getting into the engineering, the cars, the aero, the engines, that kind of thing. But this one will be like very basic from the complete start. You know, like absolutely nothing about F1. We'll try and go through everything to get you up to speed before the start of the next season. So, I guess from now we'll just start off with the history of F1 then. So, shall we get into it?
Do it.
Let's do it.
I have no clue.
It's like we're the experts. So, F1, the F1 Championship started. There were races beforehand, but the first like actual F1 Championship, the same as we have them now, started in 1950. Ferrari was actually entered in that, and obviously they're still there now. So they have a rich history in the sport. Do you have like a favourite Ferrari era?
Probably, I think everyone, probably Michael Schumacher, that kind of era.
That's, yeah.
Yeah, I think for everyone that's kind of the iconic era, isn't it? They just totally dominated everyone.
Yeah.
And I think with Michael Michael became kind of like the brand image of the sport. He became kind of like everyone, whenever someone referred to F1, they were kind of referring to Michael. He became synonymous with the sport. And so I think that's why kind of Ferrari at that time became kind of...
Definitely, yeah. Like if you speak to half the grid, like most of them talk about Michael being their idol when they grow up. So most of the F1 drivers of today grew up watching Michael Schumacher, and they were fans of him growing up. I mean, even his son's in the sport now as well.
Yeah, probably like the other era would be like Niki Lauda, like it's like early 70s.
Yeah,
late
yeah,
70s.
It would have been something
Late
like that.
70s, yeah. That car actually looks really nice. Like as in like that shape. I really like that.
The evolution of one cars is incredible, and we'll probably get more into that for the next one. So, yeah, so Ferrari's been in the sport for a long time. McLaren...
They've always raced, so since the start of the actual championship. Ferrari have been there, like, besides I think they actually ran white colours I think for one race. Where they were not there for like one race, something like that, as a protest for them, like they were gonna leave essentially, like.
They love doing that. They love playing that card.
But
they just threaten to leave every 5 seasons, like.
Because the sport is synonymous with Ferrari basically, but they never actually left. I think like besides like one race or something where they did it as a protest, they've raced in every single like race up to today.
It's crazy. Actually, I think I saw a stat quite recently, which was the first time two Ferraris didn't manage to complete the first lap of a race they were in was Singapore 2017. I think it was 17 when Vettel and
Kimi
Raikkonen crashed into Verstappen.
I said Kimi and then I said Raikkonen as if I'm correct.
Like they're two different people. But yeah, so they're the most, obviously seeing as they've been in the longest, you wouldn't be surprised to hear that they're the most successful in the sport. Every time Ferrari has a drought, they don't win anything, they come back eventually. Like it's a safe bet to say, oh yeah, it doesn't matter how long it will be, but eventually they'll come back. Maybe
to be fair with the amount of money they have and the amount of engineers they have, they're gonna come back eventually. Obviously,
the resources are massive.
Before this year, there wasn't kind of like a cap on the money. So
yeah, interestingly, they get paid millions just for entering. So this is completely separate from prize money. just the fact they'd entered into the season,
They
they'd
got
get
like an
paid a
extra
massive
60
amount.
million, I think
It was something ridiculous, yeah. And
Yeah.
obviously they'd get more than the other teams. Like McLaren and Williams would get a bit as well, but not as much as Ferrari.
It's called, I think it was like a heritage fund essentially, whereas
Yeah, that's
like Ferrari got like the most, and then McLaren, Williams, and Mercedes I think got a bit, and then basically everyone else.
Yeah, they wouldn't get as much because we've had. We'll get into the different teams later, but like just specifically history-wise, we've got Ferrari the biggest, McLaren also there. They have a rich history. They have periods of dominance as well. I'd say the most iconic has to be pretty much everyone's favorite car is the McLaren MP44.
Yeah,
which is.
I think that
I think
era
same
was
as
just like insane. But I think like out of the big car brands we have today, like the only one to actually start in F1 and then become kind of like a road car and develop from there was McLaren.
Yeah, they made the
Whereas
road cars
Ferrari-
afterwards, didn't they?
Yeah, Ferrari was actually like a road car and then they got into Formula 1. Williams has always been an F1 team, they've never made a road car. All the other teams were road cars and then they like came into the sport, like sports cars, and then they came
Yeah.
into the sport. McLaren was the only team that actually started off as a Formula 1 team and then branched out and made essentially like, now they have sports cars and road cars and such.
Yeah, because they don't tap into the like
Yeah.
average market. They go
Exactly.
straight in for the high performance cars and stuff.
Yeah, but like if you look, they have like, I think it was, I sent you like a video where they have a factory or like a massive storage unit, McLaren,
Oh yeah.
with all like the Formula 1 car, and it's just beautiful.
There's some nice. I think a couple years ago actually, F1 posted a video. I'll try and link it if I can find it. It was just an animation. Imagine like a blue background, the outline traced of an F1 car, and it varied from 1950 up until now. And they had a steering wheel in the top left corner or something, doing the same thing. And it's really interesting to see the evolution of how they changed and what they looked like. Because honestly, the 1950s cars, if you look at it, looked like a tin can. Like it literally just was a tin can. And then there was a massive hole in the front for where the driver would sit, and that was it. And then slowly they'd introduce wings and stuff, and they'd keep making better designs.
Downforce. A lot of like the technology we have in cars today actually came from Formula 1.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
paddle shifts you have in cars nowadays that originated in like Formula 1, like it became like widely adopted in Formula 1. I wouldn't be surprised if it was actually like designed for a Formula 1 car and then adopted, but it was widely used in like, was it like Formula 1 in the beginning?
I think it was it was like mid 90s or something. I think Ferrari might have been the first team to introduce it.
And then like stuff like increasing downforce, like downforce essentially became a big thing in Formula 1.
The sleek car designs you see today, like the bar of soap looking kind of cars, they come from F1. Like before, everything was literally just a square, and it was just a fat block. And you can tell how modern a car is based on how sleek the curves are, and that's all from F1 as well.
It's the idea of
engines
like
and the
studying
hybrid stuff.
aerodynamics essentially, and how to decrease your drag and like improve your performance through just aerodynamics rather than like putting a bigger engine in the back.
Yeah.
That was kind of the solution at the beginning, was you want to
was.
do better, put a bigger engine.
Famously, Enzo Ferrari actually said, I think he said aerodynamics is for people who don't know how to build engines.
Yeah.
So the idea was, if you want to go faster, just build a bigger engine. But obviously now
I
F1's
think
more about aero.
every single F1 team now would disagree, but
Yeah, we'll get into aero later, and not too much, but we'll do like a little introduction.
but Williams is another big F1 team.
Yeah, so Williams, up until the Mercedes dominance that we've seen today, it was like distinctively the third best team, which is very surprising because it was started by Sir Frank Williams, who actually died quite recently, like only a couple months ago, and he made this team just by himself. He started it up, him and like I think one other guy, and they started it in like a carpet factory just outside of Oxford, and they turned it into a dominant team so fast. Like they dominated a lot of the 80s and a lot of the 90s.
Had some
then-
really good drivers.
Yeah,
then it was a bit
that's-
downhill.
they've
The
had some
start of the
legends, right?
2000s was kind of a bit disappointing.
No, yeah, they've been in a bit of a slump since then, but
But yeah,
they've changed ownership now and they're moving on. So that's the teams, I guess, of the history.
Mercedes has been there since the start.
I guess
they
it's
did
worth
leave-
mentioning Mercedes as well.
They did leave, but like the first few championships were won by Mercedes. Like at the beginning, Fangio won a few with Mercedes at the beginning, and he had that iconic kind of Mercedes design where it looks like
Silver
a tin can.
yeah.
And then Mercedes left for a bit, but Mercedes like kind of kept in contact, even if there wasn't a Mercedes on the grid. There was generally someone was running a Mercedes engine at some point.
Yeah, they did produce quite a lot of engines.
Yeah.
Lewis Hamilton loves saying like, "Oh, I've been driving Mercedes engines my whole career," and that's because Mercedes supplied McLaren's engines back then.
Exactly, yeah. And I think even like Mika Hakkinen with McLaren, they had a Mercedes engine in the back.
Yeah.
Kimi.
So we're talking from the late 90s through the 2000s.
I think before that, I'm not sure, but I think before that they were still like, I think from the early like I think from the mid-90s they came back providing engines. I'm not sure before that what was the situation. I think they took like, there was a big accident, if I remember correctly, there was a very big accident where they were involved, and then I think they took like 50 years out essentially, where they weren't involved in any racing. Or like
I'll describe this in the description if I can find it. I'll do a bit of context in there.
I'm not exactly sure. Like I remember reading something, they took like a big hiatus after like the first few things, because I think it was like related to Le Mans, I think, or like some big, I think it was F1. There was like a big accident where a car went into the fans and like a few people died, like 80 people died. So I think there was a big hiatus. I think it's related to this, if I do remember.
I'll have a look, I'll try put it, I'll put a little paragraph or maybe like an article or something, I'll link something down there to try and give context. But yeah, so ever since about last couple of years, Mercedes have now, they became a team in 2010, and then since they changed the rules, which we'll get onto later, in like 2014, they've won every single Constructors' Championship, which we'll also describe a bit later. I'm trying not to define things I'm trying to like group this properly. But yeah, so Mercedes are now also like about the same in terms of most successful teams. They're still on the grid now, they're still very powerful now, and a lot of people are actually expecting them to do well next year. So we'll see how that goes. In terms of drivers, we already did Michael. 7-time world champion, 91 wins.
If you put it in context, I think Michael has won like, out of all the Formula 1 races, he's won like 8.5% of all the F1 races in history.
That
something
sounds
like
about
that.
right, yeah.
That's insane. Like when you actually stop and think, one driver has won like close to 9% of all the races. And you think of, like I think Michael like out of all the drivers, when you talk to like someone who's not interested in Formula 1 at all, today, whether they're old, they're young, it doesn't matter. And you say Formula 1, they say one thing, and that's Michael Schumacher.
Yeah.
His name is to today. Like I think that's what we're talking about, like why Ferrari became so big, or like why that era where he was at Ferrari is so like iconic, is because of him. It became so like, because he was so dominant, and people compare him to like, I don't know, Michael Jordan or Messi or Ronaldo, or those kind of like, he was just above everyone else. And so I think he became kind of like the personality that whenever someone thinks about the sport, it kind of goes to him essentially. I think that's
and it's completely justified, because the era of dominance we mentioned earlier with Ferrari, including 2000 up until 2004, were some of the like most dominant F1 cars we've seen. Like the F2002 and then I think 2004 as well were like levels ahead. I think even in 1999, he broke his leg in Silverstone, and came back, and he's still like almost on the championship. Like if he didn't break his leg, he would have had that championship wrapped up completely. So there's some insane stats. There was one season he was
97. He was 1 point behind the guy.
Oh yeah, there was that. Yeah, and just to round off this kind of dominant period with Schumacher, there was one season now. He's lost the record for the most podiums in a season to Verstappen last year.
But that's only because the season is a lot longer now than it was back then. It was 17 races, now it's 23.
It was 22 this year, and it was 17 in 2002, and Schumacher was on the podium in every single race, which is incredible considering reliability wasn't as good as it is now, and
unless you're
just in terms of driving and stuff. Unless you're Mercedes, yeah. But
that feels so weird saying, I'm not gonna lie.
What do you mean?
Some Mercedes are known for being extremely reliable, and then their engine this year has just been...
It's strange, yeah. But to be fair, they haven't had that many They haven't retired from it, they just take penalties. Anyway, we're not going to get into that. So, on top of that, we've also got the tracks, which is another historic part. There are certain tracks which have been on the calendar from the start. There's also other tracks that have been in pretty much almost every season. The most historic ones, there's quite a few, but I'd say the biggest four would be Monaco, Silverstone, Spa, which is in Belgium, and Monza, which is the Italian Grand Prix. Those are the most iconic ones. There's also, you could say, Suzuka in Japan.
Yeah, I was going to say that. The Nürburgring.
Nürburgring in Germany, yeah, that was another one. Spa and the Nürburgring both had like bigger layouts.
Fuji.
Oh yeah, Fuji's on there as well. But Spa and the Nürburgring, if anyone's played like a racing game, the Nürburgring, you can get the Nordschleife, which is the famous like massive long one. That's the one they used to use for F1, but obviously after accidents and crashes and stuff, they swapped that one out and they use a shorter version of both now. Monza as well actually used to have a longer layout, but
Yeah, it used to have like this massive like banking, which they removed, which is kind of sad to be honest.
Yeah, it was insane, that one. If you see pictures of it, it's mad. But I mean, do you have a favourite out of these? People don't really like Monaco anymore. But
I Fuji is just like, it's that one racetrack where you go look at it and you're like, the racetrack was just beautiful. Honestly, like as in like, the first time I actually saw it was in we're gonna talk about this a bit later, but like Niki Lauda's the movie where it's about Niki Lauda and James Hunt, and like the racetrack below like the mount is just amazing. So I'd say that one. Suzuka is really special as well. You didn't mention the Brazilian Grand Prix.
Oh yeah, Brazil's so historic. Yeah, Brazil's nice. It's very nice.
Yeah, I'd say my favorite would be Silverstone, Monza, Suzuka probably in Brazil.
Fair enough. Those are good choices, to be fair.
Spa would kind of be like the closest.
I love Spa. So if anyone's got like a racing game, or if you get the F1 app or something, they have like an app now where you can play the game. Like race anything around Spa, race anything around Monza. I'd say Spa's the favourite, but if you want to do like Monaco, if you want to rage, Silverstone,
I like Spa.
They're
I
all
just
nice.
don't like the back part of Spa. Like as in, you know, like they go up the hill and around. That's like to the end of the track. That part.
Oh, you
That's
hate
really
the middle
nice.
sector?
I just hate the rest of it.
I love all of it. It's so fun. Once you hook it up, it's perfect. Like it's so.
You know, they go downhill and then I just like from that.
No, it's fun. It's fun. Don't listen to it. It's actually
just
fun.
not interested.
It's good.
It's
You're
too
just
long.
bad at the game.
No, I've never actually played it. Like I've played
There
it.
you go.
Look at that. But as in, the track is just way too long.
I prefer it like that though. It flows nicely.
It does. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's like the longest track.
It's better than short tracks though.
It's the longest track on the.
Yeah, but it's better than like Austria. Lap times in Austria are like.
Yeah, I'm not saying no one's saying like Austria is good. I'm just saying like Silverstone is way better. Brazil is way nicer. As in it's long, but it's not that.
Brazil's tiny.
Yeah, but it's not like Silverstone's fine.
Yeah,
Spa's just way too long. Spa's literally the closest that came to it was Saudi, and Saudi, the new Saudi track is amazing. That you have to add that one. Like the new
it's
Saudi
not historic.
track. It's not historic, but that track is amazing. Like I have not watched a race besides like what happened at the race, but as in the actual layout of the track, it's just amazing. Like the fact that it's so close that if you do anything wrong, you're just straight to the back. I just. You know, that's the issue with all the tracks now because, like, they have way too much runoff. I think George Russell mentioned this where he
They
said
do,
that
to be fair.
he hates runoff because you can make a mistake and just come back in. Whereas if you make a mistake in Saudi, you strain the barrier after the race.
Well, yeah, that is the thing that's in common with a lot of these old tracks is they don't have runoff, they have grass or they have gravel traps or like Monaco, they just have walls. So I guess that's what makes old fans love them so much because it's just the risk factor to it, I guess.
Yeah,
So
and
as soon as you make a
it's
mistake,
right
it's
on the
gone.
edge. Like, when you look at the cars, they're going maybe in certain parts like 300 kilometers per hour. And then you have to, like, brake and go. And, like, you know, in Monaco, there is that right-left turn where Charles stuck in the wall.
Swimming
this
pool
year.
chicane, yeah.
I'm not
You
sure.
mean swimming?
Where
Or just
they
after
basic-
the swimming pool?
Yeah, you see.
Yeah, it's
all-
just after the swimming
You
pool.
see all the
chicane, yeah.
drivers, they basically, like, the tire just
I'll
touches.
I'll put this one in the description as well.
I know
exactly
That
what
is
you're on about.
that is like, you know, they just kissed the barrier.
Yeah.
That is like when that's so beautiful.
It's
Like,
satisfying to
you
watch,
just
it's so
look at it and
satisfying.
you're like, that's incredible. But yeah, I'd say you have to put Saudi in there, not as a great track, but not as a historic track.
Yeah, it's alright to be fair. We could get into a...
It's a great
I don't know.
track.
What are some of your, like... Do you have any standout moments from any of these? Like Monaco, Silverstone, Spa, Monza?
Monaco. I'm trying to think. Monaco would be Ayrton Senna going one-handed around like with his hand. Like that one is just how he does that. I don't know. Like
that's different.
Because they're going they're going so quick. So that kind of Monaco that stands out. I don't think anything else stands out, to be honest. Silverstone. Lewis winning in the wet, where it's like 60 seconds, like where he laps everyone. He laps Felipe Massa, who was like his title competitor. That was too funny.
Lewis is elite, yeah.
Spa is like, and here comes Sebastian. He overtakes Lewis. That's the sick one.
People love that clip. Yeah.
That's amazing. Or like Pierre overtakes. I think it was Sergio Perez, like up there.
Yeah, we linked this one a couple weeks ago.
That was good. That was amazing.
I guess Monza has to be either Charles Leclerc winning or Pierre Gasly winning.
No, I was gonna say Sebastian winning in 2008. That's more.
Oh yeah, that was good in the race.
Because he led pretty much the whole race.
In the Toro Rosso as well. I shouldn't have won.
Yeah.
That's an AlphaTauri today.
How he took pole and led like basically the whole race, I don't know. That just showed like he was, like when people say he's not that talented, people have no clue what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Like he led in a Toro. He took pole and led pretty much the whole race. That says everything you need to know. Brazil would be. I'm trying to think. There's so many moments in Brazil.
It has to be Senna.
But like,
to be fair, it's been the title decider quite a few times. So
yeah,
there's some good moments, but Senna winning his first home race is like
that one.
There's a radio of him like screaming.
There's that one. I think you have to say that, like, even if it's not.
Yeah, and obviously this was like 80, so this is before our time, but like still.
Okay,
it's worth mentioning.
that one, but like as a second one, would be like, you know where Michael Schumacher let Sebastian by to win the title.
Oh, right.
And if he didn't let him pass, he wouldn't have won the title. I think that was a special.
Ironically, a race that ended under the safety car.
Yeah.
We'll move on now to actually, to be fair, just to round off the history section. Lewis Hamilton now.
He's won 9.2% of all F1 races.
He is, 7 times, should have been 8 world championships. 103 wins, I believe. The only black driver ever in F1. And he's the most successful. Like, he has so many records. If I listed them now, we'd be here, like, for the rest of the episodes. Like, honestly, it's...
For 2 minutes.
You fully know he has all the records. But
so salty, bro. Relax.
Kimi
has the most important one, bro. He's raced the most in F1. Kimi's raced like what? 30% of all F1 races. Just actually think about that.
Has he actually done that?
From the 1950s?
He doesn't have 30%.
No. He's raced like what? How much is it? How many races is it?
No.
Actually, Google it. Maybe it's 20 something. No, 30%. I think it's 20 something. On the suspense of Google.
I actually
podcast.
Surely no. I think it's just over 300. Oh wait.
Yeah, the whole F1 has been 353, so like about 30%.
353. So if we've done like 1,050.
No, it's like 1,200 and a bit.
We haven't done 1,200.
No, 1,050. Okay, maybe it's 1,050.
We'll do over like 340.
Yeah, so 30%.
Oh, it is actually just 30%. That's insane.
Shut up. Listen to me when I say
something.
That guy raced for a third of all the races in F1.
And he doesn't even care. It's just a hobby for him.
Bro, Kimi... You know, I think like that's actually a sad part where Kimi's raced so far after his prime that people now only... When people think of Kimi, they think about like Kimi being funny. They don't think about Kimi, how dominant he was. Like, Kimi was so dominant and Kimi never cared. Like, people dedicate their whole lives to winning an F1. Kimi just wins by showing up. Bro, like his first race, he was napping to like half an hour before the race. Someone came and was like, you have to wake. Bro, there's a race. You're going to race a Formula 1 car in half an hour.
What guy?
It's like, the guy's still asleep. And he went out and he got like points. Like,
I swear he was, so the people talk about what season was it? I think it was 2005. No.
3.
It was 3. Yeah, 3. They said he peaked and he should have won and all of this because the McLaren wasn't reliable.
Yeah.
and then I think there was another one that was like 5 or something,
I think it was 2005.
where he was also like really good, but the car wasn't reliable enough or good enough. So
He kept retiring essentially, and then he won in 2007 when no one thought he was gonna win.
yeah.
But that's because Lewis, couldn't
It's
handle
because
the pressure.
it's because McLaren was.
No, he couldn't.
It was
handle the pressure.
Spygate. They weren't allowed to win if
No.
I slipped and something. You know, there's actually a theory about that. There's a theory. So Lewis was asked about this in 2011.
He lost it in China, bro.
Yeah, but why did they leave him out for so long?
He lost it in
Why
China.
did they leave him out for so
He
long?
lost it in China, bro.
Why did
he
so
get
long?
stuck in the gravel?
Because his
'Cause he
tyres
can't
were
drive.
gone. They were
'Cause he
literally
can't
gone.
drive.
Bono, the tyres were gone. Bono, the tyres were
He
gone.
didn't set the fastest lap though. Bro, the truth of the matter is, Lewis can't drive.
The face, bro. The face is back. Right, listen. We'll move on from the history.
The
section.
Lord of the Eyebrows is better driver than him. I just heard someone say about Fernando Alonso, the Lord of the Eyebrows.
Yeah, I think it's.
And I just
I
found
think
it
it's
so
Josh
funny.
Ravel.
Yeah,
refers to him as that.
I just found it
We've
so
got
funny.
to. I've got to link that picture of Alonso down. Like Alonso's had some horrific outfits back in the day.
Bro,
Like,
all
he's
of them. I sent you a video
He's
of
a
all of them.
strange looking guy.
Like
but
Michael had that like fur one. Lewis had like the,
He
the
went
like Vodafone.
baggy jeans and that with the Vodafone shirt. Yeah, it was
And then
weird
Fernando had like the bandana.
stuff. He had the weird glasses as well.
And the
Bro,
weird
guy is
glasses and
strange.
like, it's just blue and yellow and it was weird. Like he looked like that looked bad.
Strange. Alright. I guess we'll just wrap up the history segment. We're gonna go on to like how F1 actually works. So we're gonna go into like the just the idea of it in general, really. So that's how it started off. There's some historic moments and stuff. But now, if we get on to what F1 actually is, we've got 10 teams, ranging from some of the ones we've already mentioned to other ones that are newer. They have, I don't know, billionaire owners and all of this. But we have 10 teams, and then each of them has 2 drivers, so that's 20 drivers in total. We have 23 races this year on the calendar, and your finishes in each of these races will give you points, and then at the end of the year, whoever has the most points wins. There are 2, 2 championships to win. The drivers, where your individual points are added up, and then, you win. Or you have the constructors, which was introduced in 1958, where you and your teammate, the 2 people in the same team, they have their points added up, and then that gets accumulated for the team, and then whoever has the most points out of that wins as well.
I think like 2 things to mention. 10 teams is what we have now. It used to be we used to have a bit more, a bit less. And the 2 drivers, teams used to like have a few more. They'd have like 3 drivers at some point. That's just kind of what we have now.
Yeah,
This is just to kind of range. 23 races. That's just like it used to be a lot less, but as time has gone on, like the number of races has obviously gone up.
Yeah.
And the way the points are distributed is, the higher you finish, the more points you get.
Obviously, yeah. We'll get onto the specifics.
I think it's just
points
fair
in a
to
sec.
mention that because a few people were confused by. Someone asked me recently, I don't remember who, but they asked me, it's like, how do they get points? And they're actually like confused.
Okay.
Do you like how the grid is set up? And it's like, do you win by like? It's like, do you win the race by timing or do you whoever finishes first? And you're very confused.
Now we'll get on that. So just to start off, we'll start off with the race weekend and then build up to the race and points afterwards. So we start off with just the race weekend in general. The race weekend starts on a Friday. You have 2 practice sessions. Thursday, which is just a media day, like it doesn't really count. Exactly. But they just go about doing media, they do interviews and
that's
all that
that's
stuff.
when the teams basically, they come in with like, generally speaking, the teams will plan like a few months ahead about how they're going to get all their equipment to the country. And it's generally a matter of, depending on, like if the country's in Europe, it's going to be like
trucks driving there.
Trucks driving there. If it's say Singapore or the US and stuff like that, they generally have ships going like a few months before.
Yeah.
So the stuff gets there, I think, on a Monday or a Tuesday, and then they set up essentially from a Tuesday, and then everything has to be done by like Friday night, where they set up like the hospitality stuff, they set up the garage, the cars come in, all the extra
F1
stuff.
sets up the directing and stuff because they need a massive building to show like stream the cameras to everyone.
Yeah, so basically that all is done, like the actual F1 weekend will probably start on like a Monday or a Tuesday, but that's just the teams kind of getting everything ready for the actual race. Thursday is just like, this is like most of them except I think Monaco is a bit different.
Monaco does change things, but we'll just leave it general for now.
So generally speaking, the start on Monday and then Thursday is media day. So you get kind of the drivers come in and like, depending on like the way they set it up, like the Formula One kind of whoever, they put like drivers together. So like it'll be like say Lewis and Verstappen or whatever. They did that in the end, you know. I think it was like for
it's so fixed. Yeah, it's meant to be random, but yeah, they did Horner and what's his name? Horner and Wolf were in the same one for that as well.
And then Lewis and Verstappen were like, yeah, this is random.
But so the first time you'll see cars on track, then, if you want me to word it properly, is Friday. They have 2 practice sessions, which are I think an hour long each now. They used to be an hour and a half, where it's not competitive. They just set times. They go around. They get used to the track layout and stuff. It's mainly just about gathering data. So they'll see how the tires work. They'll see what it feels like. They'll try and set some good lap times. It's just general. It's to help set them up to find the strategy for the actual race. The interesting stuff is on Saturday. That's the first competitive session and it's qualifying. So do you want to run through Q1, Q2, Q3?
Yeah. So Saturday we have FP3, so the final practice session, and then the way qualifying works. Yes, this is what my friend described as well. So the way qualifying works is you have 3 qualifying sessions: Q1, Q2, Q3. Q1 has all 20 cars, and then essentially they all go around, and there's like I think it's like 20 minutes. Correct.
I want 18, I think.
18 minutes. So there you have like say 18 minutes where you can go at any point in time, and you set up your quickest lap essentially. And based on your quickest lap, the table is set, so P1 to P20. And then the last 5 are knocked out. So you have 18 minutes, you can go around the whole 18 minutes trying to set the fastest lap, or you can go around once or twice, it's up to you and your team. And like essentially it determines how many tires you use. So that's Q1. The last 5 are knocked out, so going into Q2 you only have 15 left. The last 5, that's their starting position unless penalties are applied. So Q2 is basically, it's a bit less, I think it's 15 minutes. The 15 left, like the cars left, they go out and set their fastest lap. And the same thing, and the last 5 cars are knocked out. And then the tire you qualify on in Q2, so if you qualify in Q2, that tire is the tire you start the race on.
If you're in the top 10.
If you're in the top 10, yeah. And then Q3 is the last 10 drivers, they go out and they set their best times. And this is where, like, if you're like a car in the top 3, this is the one that actually matters, because this is the one where you need to be first to start P1, or you want to essentially, that's the really critical one.
Yeah.
And that's how kind of the grid is set up from P1 to P20. Obviously, if you do something wrong, you can get a grid place penalty, which is they put after qualifying before the race. So say if I qualify on pole, I get like a 5 grid penalty for ignoring double waved yellow flags or something.
We'll explain that.
I'll go down from P1 to P5. So say I block another driver in qualifying, I'll go down from P1 to P3. So like whoever is P2 will go up to P1, whoever is P3 will go up to P2, and I'll go down to P3. That's kind of the way it works with penalties. So is kind of you go down.
So qualifying just answers the question, how do you decide who starts where? Because if you're starting at the front, you've obviously got an advantage. So what they do is they do this to decide what order they line up in for Sunday's race. That explained it pretty well. Just as a definition as well, pole position is just qualifying in first. So if you're starting in first on Sunday, you've got pole position.
Pole position is basically who's the quickest person.
So whoever sets the fastest time, you get
over one lap, he takes pole position. In qualifying, whoever sets the fastest lap over the course of one lap in the race gets the fastest lap of the race. That's the difference.
Separate, we'll do that with the points. So then on Sunday we have the Grand Prix. It's the only event in the UK. It's normally around like 1 o'clock, like just middle afternoon. It can vary depending on time zones and night races and stuff, but normally it's around then.
It's a bit later if, like, say you have Singapore or the US. It will generally kind of...
Yeah, it'll shift things a little bit. Australia will also put it in the morning as well. Like places like Japan will put it like morning races, maybe even 6 a.m. But it's normally quite good. It's an attainable time. the laps are decided based on the length of the track, so we have like a minimum distance to cover, so that's why there's different numbers of laps. It may look like a lot, like Monaco is 71, but Spa is 44.
Short, yeah, it's a very
but
short
it all
lap.
varies, like, at the end of the day, they have a 2-hour limit, most races are about 90 minutes realistically, so it's not that long, like realistically. It looks long, but it's not that long.
They have like 2 hours of like actual race time, so if there's like a red flag, or if the race actually, a red flag is where a race stops, that technically doesn't count from the 2 hours. They can go a bit over then.
Yeah, but the
this
2 hours
has
is just the
happened
TV slot they have to keep
Yeah.
within now, because it was a rule introduced after probably the most entertaining race there's ever been, at least for me,
Which one?
Canada 2011. It's a quality race. Anyway, so that's the Grand Prix, there's the race. Whoever finishes first wins, and then based on your finishing position, after penalties obviously, the points are handed out. The point system then for the drivers is the winner gets 25, second gets 18, third gets 15, and then it goes, oh, wait, hold on. 15, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 1.
Yeah.
So that's P1 to P10.
Yeah.
If you finish 11th or below, you don't get any points. So points are very important, especially for the drivers. If you want to win, it's important. For the constructors, they get prize money based on where they finish, just like the Premier League and other stuff like that. So the higher up you finish, the more money you get. So you want to be doing that. What else? We'll go with the calendar. If we want to move on to the calendar. So they acquire these points at the end of a race, then you move on to the next one, the stuff gets shipped, we move over, you start the race weekend again.
It used to be one like point fact about the points and like stuff like that is like, say for instance like Lewis Hamilton has like a crazy amount of points now compared to say Senna and even Schumacher and stuff, because like before that it used to be whoever won got only 10 points.
Oh yeah, they've been messing with the point system a lot.
So the point system has varied. Obviously the number of races also has varied. So if someone has driven in the past like 15 years, they will have a lot more points than someone who's won more, but who's done that say in the 80s or 90s or 70s or whatever, because they'll only have like per win they'll only get like 10 points.
Yeah, so F1 stats are always skewed in that way.
Yeah.
Same way we've said about Verstappen having the record for most podiums in a season.
Yeah,
When if you do it based on percentages, it's actually it would be Schumacher. But there's no way of like accounting for fairness and all of this with F1 stats because there's just so many variables. So so the calendar, it's now 23 races. Tracks pay a fee to get on the calendar. They negotiate deals, and then they get rotated. So there used to be races in certain countries like South Africa.
That was a good race.
There were quite a few other ones, but they have them in places and then a few years later they get dropped. Like Malaysia was actually a really good one, but they got rid of that recently. Nürburgring was on there. So yeah, there's quite Suzuka should be coming back, but it's been out for COVID for a while.
So the race is coming back this year. China, Canada, and Japan, and one more race. They updated it. They just
Australia.
Australia.
Yeah.
And Miami is the new one that's coming.
Miami's a new one we haven't been to before, yeah.
Yeah, but Japan is.
Singapore. Did you mention Singapore?
No.
Singapore is coming back as well. Yeah. Singapore's a good one.
I like how Russia's just a white flag, as in there's literally nothing there.
Yeah. So those are the tracks. Some are better than others. Every single track is split into 3 sectors. It's about a third of the track, but it's to help with timings and safety. A sector is just, the lines are shown. So if you say sector 1, sector 2, sector 3, it's just parts of the track. It helps with qualifying and it helps with race times. It just splits things up. So if it's like Red Bull are fast in sector 1, they're fast in the first few corners. And then if Mercedes are faster in sector 2, they're faster in the second.
Yeah, it's exactly like how like in football you have two parts of a pitch. Like you have that half and that half. But it doesn't belong to anyone, but as in like essentially it's the same idea, but instead of splitting it into 2 halves, it's split into 3 thirds.
It helps safety wise as well.
Yeah. So like if there's an accident in like one sector of the track, everyone has to be very slow there because the marshals will be coming on the track to remove like debris and such. It's used also for like say qualifying. They compare like sector time. So like
do you want to explain the colours quickly? That's why I've put this bit down.
So
yellow the first one.
Okay, yeah. So yellow means that you haven't improved on your best time. Green means you're improving on your best time, but that means it's your own best.
Personal best, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Purple means you're quickest of everyone. That's why we have like the purple here.
That's the explanation of the colour for our logo.
Yeah. So this is for sector times. In terms of like, so if you get purple, you're quickest of everyone. You can get green, purple, and still be quickest of everyone. It depends. Obviously, like certain sectors will play more, like they'll be more critical to lap time than certain sectors, depending on the track and conditions and such. So, yeah, that's basically everything.
Yeah, so that's sectors explained, and then we've done the point system. If we just go into the drivers, as we've mentioned before, the most championships, it's a record held, unfortunately, joined by Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton. Other key people.
Yeah, Schumacher's.
We've got Fangio had 5.
Prost 4.
Vettel 4.
Senna
has 3.
Jackie Stewart has 3.
Niki Lauda, I think, has 3 as well.
Has 3, yeah.
And then there's quite a few of 1.
Just bring it up.
I think there's been like, no, we'll just do off the top of our heads. There's been like a 34 F1 champions or something like that. Yeah, I think Verstappen became the 34th F1 champion.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think who won 2.
There's loads of names where I can't remember. Alonso is the key one. Yeah, he's worth mentioning. So Alonso's won 2, he's on the grid now. I don't think there's any other world champions on the grid now.
No, but as an search up, I'm actually curious as in to mention the names. Because I want to see if the names I'm thinking of are good or not. We've actually been spoiled. Like, quite a few drivers have won, like, 4, 6. Schumacher before that won, like, quite a few back-to-back. It's been crazy, hasn't it?
Yeah, so it goes Lewis, Fangio, Prost and Vettel joint.
Schumacher, you didn't mention Schumacher, but you jumped Schumacher.
Did.
No, Schumacher, Lewis, Fangio, Prost, Vettel. Yes! Jack. Yeah, I was right about that. PK, Senna, 1-3, you didn't mention Senna, bro. Ascari, Graham Hill, Jim Clark, Emerson Fittipaldi, Mika Hakkinen, bro, how do you forget?
Is a big one.
Fernando Alonso, they won 2, and then for 1 we have...
There's loads of people who won. But
wait,
on the current
let me just read a few of them. Jensen Button, Nico Rosberg, Kimi Raikkonen, Damon Hill.
Some of the people you'll see on Sky.
Jack Villeneuve, Max Verstappen, obviously, Alan Jones, James Hunt, obviously everyone.
Mario Andretti's a famous one.
Yeah, because he's the only American, basically. No, there's Phil Hill.
Oh yeah, Phil Hill was up there.
James Hunt, people know if you've watched Rush. So the country with the most F1 titles is actually the UK. Or like...
Yes, it is, yeah.
That's the only reason I mentioned it.
Is that just that's all you wanted to
Where's
say?
Keke Rosberg?
He's got one.
But he wasn't on the list.
Yes, he was.
No, he wasn't. I swear he wasn't on the list.
Bro, fine, where is he?
Was he? Oh yeah.
Yeah, there he is.
Keke Rosberg.
Above Nigel Mansell.
Okay, I'm sorry. Apologies.
Alright. And then in terms of constructors, I can't be bothered to list them, but Ferrari's got the most, like I said before.
Ferrari, McLaren, Williams, Mercedes. Renault, Lotus.
Anyway, so we've got 2 types of teams pretty much. Like, mainly, we have manufacturers, the ones that make the engines, and then customer teams who buy the engines. Everything else has to be made. Okay, there are certain parts you can sell to other teams, but in general, you have to make your own car, and then you can buy a few, like, small parts. There's a list of certain parts you can buy off other teams, but the main one's the engine. The people who make the engines, we have Mercedes, who sell their engines.
No, Mercedes, Ferrari, Renault, and Honda, but Honda left the sport, so now we only have 3. But there is debate over Audi or Volkswagen coming in as an engine manufacturer. And from next year, Red Bull is going to be an engine manufacturer as well. So from next year, it's Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, and Renault, which is now Alpine, but Renault. So the four manufacturer teams on the grid now: Mercedes, Alpine, or Renault, if you want to say, Ferrari, and Mercedes.
Yeah, and then they sell theirs. they sell theirs to the other teams. The important thing is there's benefits to both. If you're buying your engine, you don't have to do all the work developing and stuff. You just get your fresh engine put in. But if you're making your own engine, you can suit the car to the engine because all
You
the
design
parts
that
and
car
stuff.
around the engine.
Yeah, so you design the car to fit the engine. The thinner the car is, the better aerodynamically it is, and the faster it will go, probably. So what you want is to be able to make your own engine designed to suit your car specifically. And that's the issue McLaren had last year when they were changing engines, because the conversation was, would they be able to adjust to the different sizes and the way it's laid out and stuff like that. Okay, so constructors get money, just to round things off, by the historic fund, whatever you called it from before that we've mentioned.
Yep.
Prize money is also another way, and then obviously the biggest way would be sponsors. They get massive sponsorships with oil companies like Petronas or Shell for Mercedes and Ferrari, and then just other ones that you'll see stickered all across
Glasses companies. Ray-Ban and
the car. Yeah. Most famously actually with Braun GP, because no one expected them to do very well. There's an incredible image of them just with the iconic white and green car with basically just no sponsors.
They had Virgin at the end, I remember.
They had Virgin after a couple races or something, but eventually But that car was like surprisingly empty purely because it was acquired so late before the start of the season.
And no one thought they would do well.
Yeah, there was just no point.
But they're generally sponsored by they have headphone sponsors, glasses, like sunglasses, watches.
Data companies is a big one as well.
Data company, all of that stuff. PC stuff, all of that. Like some of them have Lenovo, some have HP now, like Mercedes.
Oh yeah. It just sponsors all of their equipment pretty much.
Yeah. Basically.
And then some image stuff as well. Like Rolex sponsors the whole of F1.
Yeah, but
but that's not specific teams.
Yeah, the teams all have either. I remember this. IWC sponsors Mercedes.
Yeah.
And the rest is sponsored by.
Casio does what's it called? Red Bull.
Does it? Oh yeah. And then the rest of the teams, but they're now sponsored not by Casio. That's the old one.
Tag Heuer.
Yeah. And the rest of the teams are sponsored by. I remember it's like a watch company that uses aerospace grade material and everything they make. I forgot. Richard Mille or something like that.
Oh yeah, Rich Mille.
They
sponsor McLaren.
It's French, so it's not Richard. It's Richard. But they sponsor the rest of the teams basically, pretty much. Unlike F2.
Lando got his watch stolen. I swear. Remember?
Yeah, it was like £20,000 or something.
I can't believe it.
It was one of
the guy is like 5'6".
Yeah,
I'm not even lying. He's like 5 foot. He's like 5'5" or something.
They're all short, you know. I think the shortest is
Tsunoda.
The only tall ones, like actually tall, like George Russell is like 6 foot, and then everyone else is like basically 5'9", 5'8", 5'6", 5'5". I think Tsunoda is like 5'4", bro.
Tsunoda's like 5'2", he's even short, something like that.
Really?
Yeah, no, he's tiny. There's a funny clip because Ocon's also very tall.
Giovinazzi is a bit tall.
Someone was interviewing in the media pen. They were interviewing Ocon after a race. So they've got the camera up here and they're filming. And then Tsunoda comes in and they have to turn the camera down because he wasn't even in the shot. But yeah, so we've already done the drivers. We won't really get into them because if you want to get to know them,
a shorter driver is better for the car because George Russell, because he's so tall, he actually affects the aerodynamics of the car at the front. Like to fit him in, you have to actually change the design of the car, just as like a fun fact. I
think Hulkenberg was actually too tall for certain cars as well. There was a certain point where because he's taller and heavier, teams didn't want him. So there's that. But yeah, if you want to get to know more about the drivers and stuff, we've mentioned the champions. Those are the main ones. The other ones you'll get to know them through Drive to Survive if you have to, or just media in general. A lot of them post on socials and things. So we'll move on from that.
I think it's called Drive to Survive, not Dirty Saturday.
I still can't believe you did that. I'm surprised you didn't do that today.
That's okay.
Like 14 intro attempts.
Right,
6, so
it's like 6, not 14. And you did it again when we were starting again. Don't hide it.
So we'll get on to then we get on to the actual race. So to describe the race and how it works, you start off with a formation lap. That's just warming the tyres. So when you see them weaving and stuff, they go around. They do one lap very slowly. Then they actually line up on the grid in their positions decided from qualifying.
Why do they warm up their tyres?
because they have an operating temperature. So everything in F1 has an operating temperature. The brakes, the tyres, they have to be like warm to actually be at peak performance. So they have a certain window they need to be in, which is a certain, like a minimum and a maximum temperature.
Generally
for peak
speaking,
performance.
like they warm up their tires to make them more sticky, so they can like stick better to the track in corners. So if the tires aren't warm, they won't get grip, and so when they go around the corners, they'll just spin instead of the tires sticking to the ground and going around the corner quickly. Essentially,
Back in the
that's
day,
the
they
reason
actually,
for the formation lap. Essentially,
there used to be a really good there used to be an infrared camera, if you remember, on the cars. That looked so nice. It was so cool.
I really like the new camera in the helmet of the driver. It shows how
Yeah.
intense actually driving a car, like a Formula 1 car, is.
Yeah, so after the formation lap, they line up on the grids, the 5 red lights come on, they go off, and then you start the race. That's when it starts, and then, as we said before, whoever finishes first finishes. So we'll get on to like pit stops and strategy for like this section. Pit stops make up like a major part of the race. You don't refuel anymore. The cars are fueled from the start with like 100 kilos or something.
Yeah, because of Felipe Massa in like 2008 Singapore.
Yeah. So there are loads of images of. Actually, there's a famous one of Jos Verstappen
He
when his
dragged-
entire car was in
yeah.
flames. But Felipe Massa.
He dragged like the petrol like hose with him, and like it ended up spraying actual like petrol on the car behind him, and it was lit quite quickly. I think it was Kimi Räikkönen behind him was lit quite quickly.
Yeah. So purely for safety, there's no more refueling, which means a pit stop is just 4 tyres taken off, 4 tyres put back on, and this happens in 2 seconds, which it just sums up F1. Like the fact they can just take off 4 tyres and put them back on again under 2 seconds sometimes is insane. Judging from the fact that the tyres are huge, like they weigh a lot, and they're still managing to do that. If I guess continuing with the theme of pit stops, then they make up a lot of the strategy. Do you want to try and explain what an undercut or overcut is?
So the way an F1 car works is you have different sets of tires, and if kind of in a very basic sense, you have the quickest tire that lasts the least, and you have the slowest tire that lasts the longest. And so depending on your strategy, you can either start on the soft, which is the quickest one, but at least like it wears out very quickly. Mediums, which is kind of the middle, and hard is obviously the longest lasting one, but it's the slowest one. So you can start on either, and depending on that, and depending on how long the race is, and depending on how, say for instance, hot the track is, that will dictate how quickly the tires wear out. So like if for instance, if you're racing at a very hot track, generally speaking, the tires wear out quickly, so you need to stop twice for tires. Other races, you need to only stop once. And so essentially based on which tire you stop on, it dictates like which tire you're going to go on, when are you going to stop, and which tires you're going to put on. And it dictates how actually quick you're going to get to the end. So you wanna come out of your pit stop at the perfect time. You don't have any traffic, you don't have anyone in front of you, so you can go quicker essentially. You don't want anyone holding you up. And so this is the whole idea of strategy. Essentially you wanna perfect like your tire strategy to get the most out of it, to get like essentially finish the first or like as quickly as possible. What's next?
Yeah, so that's the strategy, and then if we get to the undercut, if we start with undercut.
Okay. So if say for instance, if the leader, say the leader is, he hasn't pitted before, and he's going, so if the second driver stops before him, puts on new tires, comes out, he'll gain an advantage essentially over the front car. And essentially what he'll do is, if the leading driver comes in the next lap, stops, because the second car, he stopped first, he's actually going to have a quicker lap, and so he's going to be able to either cut down the distance between the first and second, or even in some cases overtake him. So that's an undercut. An overcut is where the front car, generally speaking if you're in first, actually runs longer. So he forces the second car to go in, change the tires, come out, but he manages to make the tires last long enough that when he comes in and comes out, he actually still stays ahead. Generally speaking, that's what's an undercut and overcut.
Yeah, so if you imagine it like us running a running track, but you have to like, in the rules, you have to take a quick 20-second break. A pit stop normally lasts 15 to 20 seconds. If you're including the time coming into the pit lane and leaving again, if you have to include that, it's just all about the strategy of how you take that break and when you take it relative to someone else, so you can gain the most time relative to someone else. And then moving on, we've got the rules. We're not going to get into rules and regulations, as they don't get followed. But there are loads of flags. The main ones you'll see are the same ones you'll see on any karting track. So black flag is disqualified. Green is you can go up to racing speed.
White and black.
White is last lap, but they don't really use that.
No,
white and black is So it's black and white with a diagonal line in the middle. That's a warning.
There is the black and white one that indicates the race is over.
The checkered flag, yeah.
There is a yellow flag that indicates that you need to slow down in a sector because there's an accident.
Yeah.
Double waved yellows mean it's worse. And then you've got
slow to like walking speed, I think.
VSC means that there's a virtual safety car, which essentially means all cars go down to, I think, 60% of their speeds.
40, I think.
40% of their speeds. And essentially what happens is to slow them down without deploying a safety car.
Yeah, so they don't bunch up, they don't do... It's just, if you imagine, Martin Brundle, the commentator, always loved to say it's like a Sky Electrics track. So if you imagine a Sky Electrics track and you have two cars 5 meters apart, if they're both going at half throttle, the distance between them doesn't change. So it's to slow everyone down, but it doesn't change anything.
It's to allow the marshals to remove debris, essentially, off track. And then you've got the safety car. When it's deployed, essentially what happens is the safety car will come out and then it will slow down, and then all the cars have to come up and catch up behind the safety car. And essentially the safety car will dictate the speed they're going at. And this will, like, if it's a big crash, they're going to have the safety car come out to allow the marshals to remove, say, like, if there's a car in the middle of the road, to remove the car, and then remove the debris and stuff. And then the safety car will come in and the race will go. So generally speaking, a VSC or a safety car will come out under, like, yellow flags. Like, when you have yellow flags, they can be, like, deployed. One of them will be deployed, generally speaking. And then the last one will be a red flag, and that means the race will be stopped. So the race will be stopped because there's like a massive crash, there's too much debris to remove.
Too much rain sometimes as well.
Yeah, so like Spa this year. So essentially what happens is the race will be stopped, generally speaking, like can be from 15 to like minutes to like an hour. And then the race will resume from where it stops. So if it stops lap 15, it starts lap 15. It can either start from a standing start, so that's like a normal like start of the race.
On the grid from how you were before the red flag. Or it can
start behind the safety car. So the safety car comes in, and then whoever's leading at the time, he dictates when the race essentially starts. So he can go slowly, and then at whichever point he feels comfortable, he starts the race by going off, and then everyone can race behind him essentially, and race gets going.
Yeah. So that sums up the race. If there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer
put them in the comments below, and we'll comment on it.
Just quickly, we'll come over like some key terms in this section. In terms of driving, another form of under and over is understeer and oversteer. Understeer is when you're turning the wheel but the car doesn't turn enough. So if you're turning but it just goes in like a straight line, it just slides forwards, then that's understeer. Oversteer is the opposite. If you imagine drifting but purely just by turning the wheel a bit too much, the rear end steps out and then you start drifting. That's oversteer. If people talk about lockups or flat spots, you're braking too hard or braking while turning, the wheel, instead of slowing down gently, if you imagine like a bike, instead of the wheel slowly stopping, it just stops, and that causes the smoke that you see. It causes a flat spot, which is the rubber, the bit of rubber that was rubbing against the track, it becomes flat rather than round, as an exaggeration.
Yeah, generally speaking, when a lockup happens, the tire doesn't go around. So what happens is the brakes will clamp, and then the tire, instead of going around, the tire will just stay fixed. And so what happens is, instead of the tire going around and like new surface area of the tire contacting the track, for the like however long they stop, the same patch is in contact with the ground, so essentially it burns up, so it melts quite a bit. So you have kind of like a weak point on that tire.
It's like
at that flat spot essentially.
Yeah. So the flat spot is the part that you've been dragging across. Yeah. So
that's the weak point essentially, the flat spot.
And then the last one is box, which you'll hear over the radio, and that just means pit. So when a driver is told to box, you're just told to pit. And then one that we've forgotten to mention before, the teams they're split into the front runners, which are the fast ones that you see like Red Bull and Mercedes, and then anyone else like behind that is called the midfield. Those are the cars that you'll see in like 10th and 15th.
Everyone,
5th.
basically everyone besides those fighting for the race.
Yeah, pretty much. So that sums up the race section.
DRS.
We'll get onto that in the technical side. So
Okay.
just quickly, we're going to do the technical side. We're going to do a full episode on this next week. But just to give like a brief introduction into this section to lead into next week, I've split this into 3 sections. The first one is aero. That F1 aero is the thing that makes cars like different to everything else. So the engines are great and stuff, and F1 cars can hit 210 miles an hour easily. And there's loads of YouTube videos of them doing drag races with Bugatti Veyrons and all of this. But the aero is the key thing.
Oh, they're much quicker, by the way. Just
Yeah, they still win. But the main thing is the corners. Like, F1 cars corner at incredible speeds, which...
To put it into context, an F1 car can go around like a corner at, like, say if a normal car goes around at like 50, 60 kilometers an hour, an F1 car can go around at like, say, 200 kilometers per hour.
Yeah,
comfortably.
So the safety car actually is a good example of this. So the safety car is either a Mercedes AMG car, like a very good Mercedes AMG, or it's an Aston Martin like Vantage, I think they use.
It's like a sports car, it's a high-end sports car.
It's a high-end sports car. The safety car driver goes almost as fast as they can around the circuit when they're trying. The F1 cars follow them in first gear. Like when they're behind the safety car, the guy's trying as hard as he can to go around the lap, and they're complaining that he's not going fast enough while they're sat in first gear. So that's the difference between the two.
To put it into context, like in certain circuits, like the average speed can go up to like 280 kilometers per hour. I think Monza is something like that.
I don't know the conversions to be honest, but like I think that's
essentially like most of the lap is just flat out on the accelerator, like as in they don't lift pretty much.
Yeah, like I think like a funny thing that people came up with was like even back in 2011, I think past 160 miles per hour, an F1 car produces enough downforce, which is the opposite of lift. Like planes produce lift as the air goes over them to help them like fly. F1 cars do the opposite of this to stick them to the ground. And at 160 miles an hour, the air is moving fast enough for them to counteract their own weight in downforce, which in simple terms means if they were driving upside down, they'd be able to carry on driving upside down. So if you have an F1 car going above 160 miles an hour, in theory, it could drive upside down.
Yeah, so there was someone had asked Daniel Ricciardo about this. So like, technically speaking, in a tunnel, an F1 car can essentially go in on the ground and go wee and just like drive fully upside down and go down. Like that's how much downforce it is.
It's something Red Bull would do. I'm surprised they haven't. They've definitely probably tried it. Like that's such a Red Bull thing to do.
No, I don't. I think it's too dangerous. Like because like someone like maybe they can try it now with like the Halo. I think before the Halo they don't know.
That's true actually. Yeah.
But I don't think there's a tunnel long enough for them to actually try this because you need to be like at full speed, and then you need like the junction between the ground and like the tunnel to be like tarmac to be perfect, and then you need that to be tarmac perfect.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
It's way too complicated.
Either way, we've Red Bull has produced like if you watch anything on Red Bull, they love doing insane stuff, extreme sports. They've done a lot of stuff with their F1 cars. Like they had them I think
drive
up against like
snow.
drive on snow. They put like special tyres and chains on the tyres. They've had it push against rugby players. I think there were like 11 rugby players
11
like
rugby players against
pushing against the F1 car. Yeah, they've done a lot.
The
of
rugby
stuff.
players held it though. I was quite surprised.
It was impressive to be fair. Solid stuff. There's strict rules about the aero because otherwise the cars would get too fast for their own good, and you need them to be safe at least because if one thing goes wrong, it's all over. But that's why they're so sensitive because they're made out of carbon fibre, which makes them very light, but it also makes them so fragile. So
carbon fibre is not fragile. Carbon fibre is strong, but when you're going into the wall at like 10, 15 Gs.
Do you know what Gs are as well? Like the
G-force. Okay, yeah. So G-force is the amount of like, so sitting down here, we're experiencing 1 G, which is 1 bar, I guess. But like, how do you explain this?
So we've got
it's
like
the
weight of our bodies.
Yeah, you're experiencing one of the weight of your body.
Yeah, 1 times the weight of our body.
Yeah.
Right now, acting downwards.
Exactly. That's from the pressure of like the air essentially. But when you're in like say an airplane, like fighter pilots can experience up to 9 Gs, and that 9 Gs is the maximum a human can actually experience. So like Formula One drivers, they experience it slightly different from fighter pilots. Fighter pilots experience it over the whole of their body. So if you look at like some of the U.S. Air Force, they have some of them where they train them essentially, and you see their face just goes like they age 50 years in like 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's the funny spinny thing where they
Yeah.
send people in that little like cage cube looking thing and they spin them around really fast.
But essentially, the fighter pilots experience it over the course of their whole body, which is essentially it's like multiplying your body weight by like say 8 or 7 or whatever, and that's how much force you're experiencing. Formula One drivers, because they're strapped in, and because the way the car actually operates, it's not going up or down. It's just going sideways essentially on the front. They only experience lateral, so it's only in this plane essentially. So it's either
sideways.
like to the front, so like backwards and forwards, or to the sides. The max they experience will be like about 5 Gs, but think about it this way: you have the weight of your head, and then the helmet on top of it, and that's pushing at your neck. So if a Formula One driver is driving, he turns, his head goes this way. If his neck can't withstand this, he misses the corner, and then he just crashes.
And that's even more G's when you crash it.
And then when you stop as well, like, so their brakes, when they stop, their brakes are so strong that, like, you see, like, amateur drivers, essentially, their head goes like but, like, you see even with Formula 1 drivers, their head moves ahead a bit, but they need to essentially keep their head, like, be able to resist all this force to be able to actually corner. And so by the end of this is why, like, drivers lose, like, 2 kgs per race, is the amount of force that their body is essentially experiencing throughout the race.
Yeah.
And for them, that's why you find like Formula 1 drivers have massive necks. It's because of all that resistance.
Yeah, so they physically have to train their necks for these forces. And every time they make an action on the car, because they're going so fast, and because the aero allows them to go this fast, they have to withstand these forces. Because if you're turning left, your head gets thrown right and then the other way. And if you brake, you get sent forwards, like you said. So
if you go quickly to the front, your hand gets sent back. But that's the least of your worries, because it's actually supported if it goes back.
Yeah, you've got the thing behind your head. So that sums up the aero. I think actually, to be fair, you can explain DRS in this one as well, because it counts as aero.
Okay. DRS is what's called a drag reduction system, which essentially is on the rear wing. If you ever watch a Formula 1 race, you see the rear wing opens. And so the whole idea behind it is, if the rear wing opens, you generate less drag, and if you generate less drag, you can go a bit quicker. And so the whole idea is, if you're close enough, you can open the rear wing, and essentially what happens is you open it, like you can see in the picture here, it opens here.
Well, what's going on?
If you go down.
Not a Sun article.
Yeah, so it opens up here. So this is an open rear wing, which, like, I don't know if you can actually see it. Like, it's open here, like you can see on top here. But when it closes, this black part goes up, and essentially what happens is to make it like better for cars to race after each other, because you generate less drag, you can go a bit quicker, you can catch up to whoever's leading the race essentially.
Yeah, so just like the sectors, there's a certain point, it's a white line, and just before the straight, this white line is called the DRS detection point. If you're within 1 second of the car ahead, then there's another line coming up probably a few meters later that a white light shows up and it says, alright, you can use DRS. You use DRS in the straight, you overtake the car if you can, and then when you brake, it closes, or you press a button and it closes, because it's only allowed within the certain straights, like they're designated zones. You're allowed it in qualifying as well to speed up the times as well.
So, so DRS in the race is not over the whole racetrack, but rather specific zones that are set out where you can safely essentially use DRS.
Yeah, because otherwise you're not producing enough downforce to go quickly around the corners, so you'd end up spinning out or something.
I think that's everything.
So that sums up DRS. We've got 2 more things quickly. Tyres, we've mentioned a lot of it before, but there are technically 7 different types of tyres. There's 5 dry compounds, which are ranging from C1 to C5, the C1 being the hardest and the C5 being the softest. The ones you see on the race, for simplification, are the red softs, the yellow mediums, and the white hards.
Yeah, so they're one of the, essentially for each racetrack, Pirelli chooses either C1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, depending on the racetrack.
So it could be 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah,
It could be 3,
and they
4, and
only
5.
they'll send essentially one of them, like essentially. So like the medium, soft, and hard can come in different. Like, so a medium for one race is not equal to the medium for a different race, because the racetrack demands are different. So they'll send like different essentially compounds. They're not the exact same compounds. So I think they label them as C1 to C5.
Yeah.
For like the medium, the three of them are labeled under like C1 for like this racetrack, C2 for this racetrack, C4. But it's the same three compounds. But
yeah. So the yellow one you see on one race is not going to be the same yellow one as you see in another race, but the yellow still represents medium wherever you go. So as we said before, the red one will degrade the most, so it will lose its performance the quickest, but it's the fastest. It's the ones they'll use in qualifying for the fast laps. The hard is going to be the slowest, but it lasts the longest, so your strategy is based around this. And then the other two that we haven't mentioned are the two wet weather tyres. The intermediate, which is when it's like damp, it's still wet, maybe light rain, they're green. And then the dark blue ones are the full wet weather tyres. I think the stats that they are, that's for heavy rain. And I think the stat is like they get rid of 65 litres of water per second. Yeah. Which is why if you see F1 cars in the wet,
the amount of spray behind them is insane.
Yeah, the spray is mad, like it's really high, purely based on that, plus obviously the aero of the cars kind of guiding. Like the way the aero is, just to talk about this again, it's so specific that the air, like the path of air is followed throughout the entire like car. So like air will be guided by the front wing, maybe to cool the brakes or sent somewhere else. So all of these little intricate parts they play a part in guiding the air to where they want it to go. And yeah, based on how good a team does that pretty much dictates how fast they're going to be. That's the tyres done. Do you want to just define like the definitions down here? So we've got degradation.
I like how you're throwing all of this stuff on me.
Bro, no, you can do it. Go on. Degradation.
Okay, degradation is the amount of wear and tear you get on the tyre. So like a normal tyre, it will last like say 10,000 kilometers. An F1 like the tyres on an F1 car will last like 50 kilometers basically.
So like 20 laps.
Yeah. So when they say deg, they mean degradation, which means like how much, the rate at which the tyres are wearing. So say for instance, like for the softs, they'll wear like they have higher degradation or higher deg than like say the hards, because they're wearing out much quicker. So you're only be able to use them for say like 10 laps rather than say like 30, 40 laps.
Yeah. The phrase off the cliff.
Oh, that's when they're gone.
Yeah, so they slowly degrade and they lose performance, and then once it's just completely gone. Like,
and they can say on the cars, on the camber as well.
So canvas, was it?
Yeah,
canvas?
They're basically like you're on the last part, as in the tyres are gone.
Alright, there's a blistering and graining.
Blistering is kind of similar to a flat spot in a way. It's where essentially you get like that weak point on the tyre. I don't know.
I saw pictures of them like earlier. They look exactly like skin blisters. Like they reduce performance. If it's very hot or a high deg track, then you can end up getting blisters on the tyres and it reduces.
It depends on like the track, where the track overworks the tyre. So you'll get like points where that point is being overworked at this same corner again and again and again. So it's gonna degrade quicker. You're gonna get like a blister. Graining is obviously where you get like, depending on the track, but the tyre wears so much, you start to see like a certain amount of grain in it essentially.
Yeah. And as you said before as well, like some tracks will work certain tyres more than others as well.
Yeah.
So if you have a lot of slow corners followed by acceleration points, you're going to work the rear tyres a lot. An anti-clockwise track will mean you're going that way, so you're going to have more left turns than right turns, which means that the outside tyre, the right-hand tyres, will be worked more. So any anti-clockwise track will work the front right a lot. So that could be the one that degrades the most. And the
Qatar, for instance, worked out like it was a clockwise and worked out the left front tyres like.
Yeah, so what you'd expect. And then the last one's marbles.
Yeah, I've no clue.
Marbles are like bits of rubber that you get off. They come off the tyres and then they get dropped on the track. these come off. They end up gathering in places where you wouldn't see the cars drive normally. So another driving term is the racing line. If you haven't heard of that, basically the racing line is it's the
quickest
fastest
way around the
It's the quickest way around the track. So you go around the outside of a corner, you cut in, you make the corner, and then you go outside again. It's opening up the angle and
Not
stuff.
necessarily, not on all cars, but like
Sometimes.
generally speaking.
And then the marbles
Fernando
will
didn't
build
do
up
that
outside.
in his 2005 car. That's what I'm saying.
That car was weird though. Like,
Yeah,
just
but as
drove
in, like
differently.
he'd actively like apply oversteer and then correct it out of the car.
Yeah.
That was the quickest way. But like generally speaking, what you're saying was correct. I was just
So the marbles will build up in places where the cars aren't normally driving, which is why there's a dirty side of the grid. Because there's more marbles on that side, it's not as clean as the other side. So it just makes the track dirtier, the marbles build up on your tyres, it's not as good. And then the last bit, just quickly, is engines. The engine regulations have been changing for ages, but currently, ever since 2014, we've been using the 1.6 litre V6 turbo hybrids.
such a long name.
It's awful. Basically, they're just the vacuum cleaners. They sound like vacuum cleaners.
We used to have like the V8 sound.
They used to be V8s, they used to be V12s, they used to be some big, loud
was there
engines.
a V10 as well at some point? I
Probably.
think there was a V10 at one point.
But, yeah,
The
this
V8
is
sounds like so like just Google like a 2008 or 2006 car and just listen to that sound. It's just so
they are,
beautiful.
yeah,
These cars don't actually, but that's the thing, they're saying like, just like as a fun fact, they're saying from the 2026 new regulations for the engine, they're gonna remove actually the MGUH. So for people who don't know,
I think I heard
it doesn't matter, but like
we'll
the
get onto
MG
it next week.
but the MGH essentially, it takes out a lot of the sound of the engine, so they're saying that once they remove that, the engine's actually gonna sound like very nice.
I reckon it'll be nice, but not as nice as it was before. I don't think it can go back to how good it was last time. We'll see. Anyway, the engine's made up of multiple components, and you're allowed a set number of these. So if you see people taking engine penalties, it's because a specific component is what's degraded. So if
So
the engine's
generally-
made up of like 10 parts, maybe you're allowed 5 of these parts across the season. If you've, I don't know, used like 5 ICs for one example, and then you need one for the next race, you're going to get a penalty for using an extra one. So that's...
Generally you're allowed 3.
Yeah, so the
As in
engine
not
itself
generally,
is
like-
made up of loads of components, which is why they're normally called power units to, you know, assign for all of
But
it.
you get like so say if you change like a small part of the engine, for you won't get as big a penalty as say if you change the whole power unit. So
Yeah.
some drivers, somewhere along the season, the drivers will change the whole power unit, and they'll just get like fresh everything essentially, and then they get some back to the back of the grid. So they get like a 20, like maximum 20 place deduction. Whereas if you change the ICU, which is the internal combustion engine of the power unit, you only go back 5 places.
Because you're just changing one part
Exactly.
rather than the whole thing.
Generally speaking, when they need new parts, they just change the whole engine and take like a massive penalty essentially.
Yeah.
The same thing applies for like the gearbox essentially. If
The
you change,
gearbox as
you're
well.
only allowed I think 3 gearboxes or a bit more. Once that goes out, you take a penalty for taking a new gearbox as well.
But yeah, I think that's it, to be honest.
I think it makes F1 sound like very complicated.
It does make it sound very complicated, but hopefully, like, certain parts of this have piqued your interest, because the whole thing about F1 is as much as it's confusing, you don't need to know that much to get into it. And then the other thing is, once you get involved in something, then you'll become obsessed with it. Like, maybe you really like the history, maybe you really like the logistics. There are videos made on how teams and stuff can go to one race in one country and then end up set up and ready for the next race in just a week, for the next race in a completely other side of the world. You might like, I don't know, the rules. The racing itself hasn't been incredible.
Realistically
recently,
speaking,
but you might like
you
that.
can't say that. The last year the races
Okay, yeah,
were
no,
the
actually,
best
to be
and
fair, yeah,
last year.
last year was entertaining.
Realistically speaking, I've been watching F1 for like what, like actively watching F1 for like 7-8 years. Like as in I watch it every year,
Yeah.
and there's still stuff that I learn like now, like some stuff I don't know, or some stuff that I need to think about. Which one was it? So it's
Yeah.
okay. Like even if you're coming new into F1, you don't need to understand everything. You'll pick it up as you go along, And like as you're watching, I think now the commentators Martin Brundle and
Crofty, they do make an effort.
Because of Drive to Survive and new fans coming in, they're a lot more aware of the fact that there are new fans watching, and so they actively go out of their way to explain stuff. So if you don't understand something, it's okay, just watch the race, and generally they'll explain it now as they go on. They never used to do this before.
Yeah,
You
they
used
never
to have
bothered,
to
yeah.
kind of understand it on your own, but now they actively go out of their way to explain why something's happening, or especially during a race.
Yeah, they're very understanding. And I guess the main thing is the technical side. Like, personally, like the only reason I'm here right now, sat in this room, is because I'm doing an aerospace engineering degree, because when I was a kid, I was interested in the era of F1 cars. You might prefer
You're
the
crazy,
tyres, you might...
You're crazy.
Bro, it's interesting, man. I'm trying to get a job, man. I'm trying to get a job.
It's because you haven't done advanced aerodynamics. So.
I can't wait. Don't make it sound like it's a bad thing. Bro, if it's a bad thing, my whole life is a lie, you know? My whole life is going to be a lie. Yeah, you might prefer the engines anyway. Like, it's all technical. The engineering is incredible. Like, there's loads of stuff to get to. The entire thing is a rabbit hole. Like even with the pit stops, like we said, pit stops are the pinnacle of engineering. Where are you going to find a 2-second pit stop in any other racing? Like, they just don't exist. So,
and plus, like, the reason F1 is, like, so big or, like, so important is essentially teams use it as a marketing tool, but also teams use it because you basically, it's like, they don't make money, but they don't lose money. It's like they just break even. But the amount of technology that's actually invested in F1, you can take that and put it into a road car, and you make like an insane, essentially, sports car. Yeah, and that's why you see a lot of the technology, like the Ferrari LaFerrari, a lot of the technology in it was actually based on the F1 car.
Same with the Aston Martin.
Even if you're the last car in the F1 race, like if you're a Haas, you still, like, the technology you have in that car is like better than most like, except like extreme hyper sport cars, not even like sports cars. I'm talking hyper sport cars, you know, like that.
Like Koenigseggs and stuff.
Yeah, like the really, really expensive stuff. Like, even not like, I'm talking like a Haas would beat a Bugatti probably. No, okay, no.
No, it would though. It would. Not with Mazepin driving it. Not with Mazepin driving it.
But as in, like, most F1 cars would be like a Bugatti, for instance, from like on a racetrack, like a full lap, they beat them. Easily. Drag race, they beat them. Like the 2012 Red Bull beat like a Bugatti. Chiron, like on a drag race.
Oh yeah, that's
a quarter mile. They actually destroy them on like a lap.
And that was a straight line.
That's
like we're saying, the corners are the main part of F1. That was a straight line. It still won. So
the amount of technology that goes into it is incredible. And you're starting to see that on more like the Mercedes
Project One.
EQS. No, even the EQS, which is it's an electric car. Some of the aerodynamics was actually inspired in a way because it has the lowest overall drag coefficient of any car ever made, and essentially it was derived. Some of the technology will be derived from F1.
That's mad, to be fair.
Yeah.
And I guess another key point, just to end this quickly, is the Williams from back in the, I think in it was early 2010s, I think. Williams, the hybrid, or it would have been early like 2014 maybe. The hybrid engine, part of the hybrid engine, there was like a flywheel or something. The technology they like developed to harvest energy when you're braking, they made this component and sold it, and now it's used in things like buses and stuff. So if you see hybrid buses and stuff in the UK, Williams sold the technology that they made to bus companies to help them. So when buses brake, they can regain some of the energy.
You see that in like road cars as well, like a Toyota, for instance. You see that quite a bit, like in these new like efficient cars as well. You see it as well with like the engines, for instance. Like say in the future, Formula One in the next few years is gonna move fully to like biofuels essentially.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be like, I think by 2023, it's fully, all the fuel it's using is biofuel, and essentially it's a test bed for like car companies in the future of like developing a fully not just the biofuel, but developing the whole kind of economy for it. So like the factories necessary, the way you transport it, the way you use it, the way you store it, all of this will be tested in Formula One and then can be moved into like just general life.
Because
And
the
this
turnover in F1 is insane.
yeah.
Like the speed at which they can develop anything is insane.
Yeah, this is the reason actually this new engine is being changed with the new regulations is because the technology like the MGUH was a huge part of the engine. It's not actually, it cannot be translated at all. Even to hypersports cars is not going to really be used. And so that's a big issue with this because you're investing all this money in a technology that's never actually going to be used. And so from the new regulations, they want to make an engine that can translate essentially into something that can be used and provide value essentially to, well, essentially like civilization, I guess.
So just know that your Prius in 2030 might be based off the 2014
The Prius
Mercedes.
now is based off some, like the Williams technology was like, is actually inspired the Prius. Like, you know how like when you brake, you see like it gains some like energy.
I haven't been in a Prius, but yeah.
But that's what I'm saying.
Because I'm rich.
Yeah, rich, yeah.
I take the bus.
Yeah, the bus that uses the same technology.
Oh yeah. Wow. I've
Yes.
been in the Williams F1 car.
And yeah.
So
Sure. I've actually seen a few ones. We went like, this is besides the point, but we went on a, like, in my second year here at the university,
yeah.
we went for like a flight test. So we went down to Cranfield and we actually got on a plane and we did like flight tests and stuff. Like they did like, they flipped the plane, not flipped the plane, but like put it on its side and like did a lot of other stuff and you take the data and you plot graphs and stuff. But Cranfield is basically like, it's a fully aerospace university and they have the Kingfisher, you know the Kingfisher, like the thingy, the Force India. F1
Oh yeah,
car.
yeah.
That, they had that one there.
No way.
Yeah, like
That's right.
the full car.
The closest I've been to an F1 car, I think
I was like, this far. Like, hello.
my mum took me to Mercedes World. So I've been to Mercedes World when I was like 16.
Really? Is that in the UK?
Yeah.
Right.
Of course it is. Yeah, something like that.
That's dead.
Bro, I was just there to drive a car. I get to drive the road cars. That was fun.
Road.
I saw the museum as well.
That's dead.
Road cars were. It was cool to drive. I hadn't driven before.
That's
this
dead.
one. Shut up! You can't drive either. What are you doing?
I can drive, I just choose not to.
You're old as well. You should have got your license by now.
I'm gonna get my license when I can buy a Formula 1 car.
Bro, you know, I saw this one TikTok, yeah. It was
She
just some
means
rich
never.
American girl. There was this rich American girl, she was just dancing about, yeah. And in the background, there's an F2000 and something. Like a Ferrari from like the mid-2000s. Like one of Schumacher's Ferraris is just up on her wall. And she's dancing about like it's nobody's business. All of the comments were like, oh yeah, nice Ferrari in the background. How's it on your wall? Like, what is this?
Charles
So
Leclerc, for
weird.
his birthday, they sent him like his car from 2019. So he has a Ferrari from
That's so
2019 parked in his house. I was like, why didn't they send me one?
I would sleep in it, bro. You know those little racing
Yeah.
beds? The Lightning McQueen beds that they sleep in. I'd sleep in his car.
You know when you get married and you're like, your wife wants to buy a bed, you're like, no, it has to be like a sports car. That's gonna be you.
Bro, she's sleeping on the sofa, I'm sleeping in my F1 car.
Anyways, I think we went off point there.
I will take that, it's all staying in. But yeah, that's the Explain series. We'll get more into the technical side and the stuff we mentioned at the end there for the next one. So if any of that sparked your interest with the aero or the engines or something, we'll explain it more along with the regulation changes for next year. We'll do an episode. Either that will fit into the next one or we'll do a whole episode on it. We'll see. And then we'll get on to predictions and stuff for this year.
Exciting. Yeah, it should
It's
be
getting
in a
exciting.
few weeks. We're gonna get like about a month essentially.
Yeah,
a little bit less than a month. The teams are gonna start unveiling their cars. So
yeah, so far announced has been Ferrari on the 17th and Aston
McLaren.
Martin on the 10th.
McLaren on the 11th.
They said as well?
They announced
Oh, I
it
did not
today.
see that one.
And then I think that's everyone. So basically, the first testing is gonna be in Barcelona on the 20th, and then after that,
Of March, right?
no, 20th of February
What?
in Barcelona, and then you've got testing in March in Bahrain. So they've got 2
Okay.
testing sessions.
Interesting.
Anyways,
Well, we'll try to get our predictions filmed before then. Whether they come out or not, we'll see, but we'll try to get them filmed before that.
anyways,
Sick. Alright,
we'll see you guys
Well-
next week, I guess.
thanks for listening and that. Subscribe and all that. Rate us on audio platforms if you got this far.
You sound so enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, man, I'm a real YouTuber and that. So, yeah, we'll see you next week.